Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Zimbalist today. He received his optometry degree from the Pennsylvania College of Optometry and completed a residency in ocular disease at the Baltimore VA Medical Center. He is a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry and currently on staff at the Harry S. Truman Memorial Veterans Hospital in Columbia, Missouri. He is also a clinical adjunct professor at the University of Missouri, St. Louis College of Optometry, and the Southern College of Optometry. In addition to his clinical responsibilities, Dr. Zimbalist has authored multiple journal articles, serves as a peer reviewer for a major ophthalmic journal. He also enjoys weightlifting, racquetball, golf, and spending time with his family. He's also the founder and owner of Ignite Medical, which specializes in search engine optimization, pay-per-click marketing, and mobile-friendly website design. So this is such an incredible topic. And Dr. Zimbalist, I know you're going to take us through all the importances of getting high tech. You know, a lot of people out there just don't know the importance of website and SEO and rankings. And we're incredibly excited to learn from you and how to improve our practices. So welcome to Woo University.
Thank you very much for having me. Can you guys hear me okay?
Hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. So my financial disclosure, as Stephanie mentioned, is I do own Como Web Designs as well as another company called Ignite Medical. Now, I do want to talk about this just for a moment here. I will not be talking about any services that I do or anything like that. The sole premise of what we're doing today is to help you learn how you can work on your own SEO for your own practice and use these techniques to improve your search engine rankings and climb higher in Google. So I'm going to go through a bunch of different things in terms of local SEO and organic SEO, but I'm not going to be talking about anything that I offer for my company in particular. So before we get going, I do want to thank Stephanie and Woo University tremendously. It's an honor to be here. I can't believe we have 573 people on here. That's just absolutely amazing. So a huge credit to you all for what you're doing. This is an absolutely amazing conference that you're throwing together here. So before we get going here, let's talk about some of the course objectives. Just like any other CE lecture you ever go to, we'll talk about what we're going to discuss. This is a 2-hour-long lecture. I know it gets tiring sitting down and listening to this stuff. Towards the end of the presentation, we're going to get a little bit on the more technical side. So bear with me. I am going to try to kind of ease us in there so you understand a lot of the basics before we start talking about all the technical stuff as we go on. So our course objectives here. We're going to talk about the anatomy of our search engine results, just very basic stuff to kind of get our feet wet. We're going to talk about the key signal factors for local SEO. We're going to talk about the signal factors for local organic SEO, because these things are different. And then lastly, this is something new I've been doing with this lecture, is I have an actual live demonstration to show you about how you can make changes in your website. And I've got a dummy practice website that I've set up here, so you can see exactly what the differences can be in keywords and how to optimize things. And this will have a direct effect on your SEO and your search engine rankings. And actually, before I go on to this next thing, I'm going to use the term SEO about 1,000 times throughout this presentation. If you're not familiar with that is, it stands for search engine optimization. And this is very, very important for the basis of everything we're going to talk about. Search engine optimization in a nutshell is how to get your rankings for your website as high as possible in Google, Bing, Yahoo, all these different search engines that are nationwide to help you be found more easily. So I love Will Ferrell. I enjoy his movies a lot, between Step Brothers and obviously this is Talladega Nights. And there was a great quote from this movie: "If you ain't first, you're last." Now, please bear with me because I am from New Jersey originally, and I've been in Missouri now for about 12 years. So I'm still working on my Missouri accent to kind of give that a little emphasis. But this is so crucial for what we do. And it really plays a really big factor, because if you think about it from an SEO and search ranking standpoint, what's going to happen is that if you go search for something online, you're going to type in, let's say, best food in Columbia, Missouri. And I'll use that example a lot because I live here. But if you type that in, if you're not ranking in those first few results, or if you're on the second or third page, people simply aren't finding you. So here's a number, 31%. Now, generally speaking, when I do this lecture live in front of an actual audience and so forth, I'll have this be a little bit more interactive, and I'll try to have people guess what it stands for. But since we're in this kind of virtual position now, what I'll tell you is that when you talk about people that actually click on your search results and your rankings, 31% of the time, people will click on the first result. That's huge. From there, it drops down around 7 to 8% for the first several rankings. Then when you start hitting 7, 8, 9, you can see that the results here are a lot less. But what you'll see is that if you're in the first 3, you're getting a lot of the clicks. After 5, 6, 7, you're getting 6%, 4%, 3%, and that's just not good. You want to be in that top 3 if you can. Top 1 or 2 is even better for you. And now the one thing I will tell you moving forward as well, I'll have different references that are set up in here and highlighted for you all. I want you to keep something in mind, that when you talk about these references and these studies that are done, this is very, very different than anything that we talk about in optometry. So these aren't double-blind, randomly placebo-controlled studies. These are companies that are running their own statistics and so forth. So always take all these things with a grain of salt. But generally speaking, the numbers that you'll see across the industries are pretty similar overall. Okay, search engine optimization. We're going to get into it here a little bit. Before we kind of dive into the nitty gritty, there are 2 different main types of search engine optimization. There's what they call on page, which is here, this big circle, and there's off page. Now, the difference is that on page SEO is something that you can do on your actual website or your web page to improve how well you rank. When you talk about off page, these are things that are not on your actual website. These are things that you may not have a lot of control over, but you may have some. So we're going to talk about all this stuff here to an extent. When we talk about on-page SEO, mobile responsiveness, that is absolutely huge. In 2018, Google came out with a new algorithm, and they said that they're going to actually start ranking websites based on whether they're mobile indexing or they're mobile friendly or not. So if you have a website that's straight out of early 2000s or 2010, it's very likely that your website is not mobile friendly and your search rankings may be affected because of that. Content marketing is essentially blogging and writing more content for your website. We'll talk about that extensively. Keyword optimization is making sure you have the appropriate keywords throughout your website to make sure that your information is getting to Google so they know what your website is about. Images are important, and then page speed. This is a really big one that we'll touch on a little bit later too. But this came out about a year ago in terms of page speed being a really important factor that they're starting to really look at a lot more. Off-page SEO, link building is a absolutely huge one. Now, this is unfortunately one of the toughest ones to do because a lot of people try to do what they call black hat techniques, and they'll try to trick Google in buying links, and they'll try to find things kind of weird about ways to go about doing it. I'll talk about this a little bit more again later on. But blogging, social media is really important, citations, and then also Google My Business. So once again, these are all off-page and on-page things that we'll talk about throughout the rest of the presentation. But this is just a great kind of summary slide so you have it for the future for you. So every time I've ever gone to any CE lecture, I feel like there's always some obligatory slide where if you're talking about diabetes, oh, we have 350 million Americans and 30% are diabetic. So here's my obligatory slide about this stuff. The one thing that is pretty important about this, though, is that the last time I saw these numbers, 46% of all Google searches are local. That's really, really big. So if you think about it, we just went to Academy back about a month or 2 ago, and I can't tell you how many Google searches I did there just alone, looking for the best restaurants, best bars, best nightlife, all these things. So you got to fathom that when people are searching things, not just when they're traveling, but just in a general day-to-day basis, they're looking for restaurants, they're looking for eye doctors, they're looking for dentists. So a lot of times these searches are going to be locally based. Overall, I don't want to talk about all this stuff too much. It's pretty boring. I want to get into the nitty-gritty of things for you. But just like when you guys were in optometry school, the first classes you probably had were ocular anatomy or head and neck anatomy. We're going to talk about the anatomy of the search engine result page, or what they call a SERP. So we'll talk about Google Ads here. Whenever you go to any essentially search engine, we're going to use Google as our primary subject because that's what we focus on predominantly, as it's the biggest search engine in America. Whenever you do any kind of local search, the first thing that you'll often see is at the top here, you'll have an advertisement. This is called a Google ad or pay-per-click. So people actually spend a lot of money to get their advertisement up in this area here. And this is important because this is something that you can do yourself as well. I would recommend if you're going to do it, pay somebody to do this because this can be pretty it can be very expensive, first off, and it can be very time consuming to do. So this is something I would definitely leave to a professional. The next thing you see in the Google search result page is this area here. It's called the Google map, or what they call the snack pack oftentimes. So if you do any kind of local search, what you're going to see is a little map, and it'll show some of the 3 best results that are consistent with your search queries. So for example, here, I searched eye doctor in Columbia, Missouri, and then you have Envision Eye Care, Mason Eye Institute, which is a big university across the street from us, and Eyes on Missouri. So this is just an example of the Snap Pack or the local SEO. The next thing you'll see, and you guys have all seen this, but you may not have seen it in this actual fashion, is you'll have your organic local results here. Now, this is just where you have the blue titles, the green URLs, and then the meta descriptions, or this what they call, it's called a meta description, but it's this paragraph that you see underneath. This information that you see here, where it says like family focus eye care, optometrist, and eye doctor, and the eye doctor is family focus eye care, this is all completely customizable. You can change this to be whatever you want. So oftentimes it's a really good idea to actually make changes in these to focus on keywords that are pertinent for your area. The next thing you'll often see as well is something called a Google My Business page. So once again, I work at the Truman VA Hospital in Columbia, Missouri here, and this is what we use for our Google My Business page. When I type that in here, you'll see the Google My Business listing here. Now, Google My Business is the absolute most crucial thing for your local SEO. If you do not have one of these set up yet, you absolutely need to do it after your presentations today with Woo You. Go there and do it and get going on this because it is one of the most important things for your local SEO. So when we talk about the local map and local SEO in particular, here's what we're seeing. We have our same exact results that we showed before, but what actually causes this information to get here? How does it get there? Why is it there? Well, the answer is that there are different components from search signals that result in these findings. So for example, when we look at the local SEO, the absolute most important thing, surprise, surprise, is Google My Business. So you need to have a Google My Business page. The good thing about a Google My Business page, it is 100% completely free. You don't have to pay a dime for it. The next thing that's important is reviews. Third is on-page SEO. So we talked about that with keywords briefly at the beginning. Then you have links, behavior, and citations. So this whole thing is going to round out to about 100%. And if you can maximize what you have going into the local map signals, you stand a better chance of getting found in the local map results here. So let's dive into Google My Business a little bit because this is the most important thing for local SEO. As we just showed, this is the absolute biggest thing. It's a #1 ranking signal for local map results. We have something here called an NAP. That stands for name, address, and phone number. So Google likes to see consistency. You need to make sure in your Google My Business page that the name of your practice, the address, and the phone number are consistent with what is actually yours. Now, you may say, well, yeah, of course it's going to be accurate, right? But even something as simple as having the letters STE instead of suite, that may make a difference to them. So if you have the word suite listed on your website, then I would have suite listed on Google and so forth. Keep it as consistent as you possibly can amongst everything. Then there's different things like business categories and descriptions. You can use reviews, or you can manage your reviews through Google My Business. You can upload photos and so forth. And we'll kind of hop into this. This is just one of my clients here. And one of the things that I want to show is that this is what a general Google My Business page will look like. Now, obviously, imagine that this part here is at the bottom as one large scrollable thing. I just broke it up for ease for what we're doing here. But one thing I want to impress upon you is that when you go to this website and you see this initial picture here, what does that tell you? Well, to me, I look at this and I see this beautiful, modern, open practice. You got to imagine and you got to think about how your patients are going to view you too. So on Google My Business, you have the opportunity to put a bunch of photos on here. You can do it of the outside of your practice, the inside of your practice, your staff members. You can put whatever you'd like on here. But I would say when you're doing this, really think about it from your patient standpoint. What would they want to see? Or if you're looking for an optometrist or an eye doctor yourself, what would you want to see on there? And what would make you want to go visit that practice? That's really important information because first impressions are huge on this. The second thing is reviews, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But then the other thing that you have on the bottom here is you have your address, like we talked about, the hours, phone number, your address. Now, what you can do even with your appointments rather, what you can do with the appointments is that you can link this directly to an appointment scheduler that you have set up with your EHR or on your website, which is a nice way to go about it. Then towards the end, later part, that'll show different reviews here and then posts that are being posted onto your Google My Business page. So once again, we know Google My Business is the most important component for local SEO, but what about it is important? Well, there are things that you can control and there's some things that you cannot control. The most important thing is to have the right category. So you want to make sure that your category is listed as optometrist, or if you're an ophthalmologist, make it that. You want to make sure that you're having the appropriate keywords in there and that you're addressing that in not only the main categories, but then additional categories as well. And I'll show you a live example of this in just a moment. So there are things that you can adjust yourself. There are also things that you have absolutely no control over. So you can change your Google My Business category. What about the keywords in your business title? Well, for example, our example that we just showed now was eye contact. You're not going to make the title of your business Best Eye Doctors in Columbia, Missouri. That's not what you're going to call your practice. So the keywords are really kind of out of your control. The proximity of address to point of search, once again, you've got no control over that. It all depends on where the search is coming from. Now, I will tell you that there was actually a big rollout about a month or two ago where Google started changing their algorithm for local SEO in particular. And they made the proximity of the address a larger factor for local search results. So what that essentially means is that if you're a mile away from where someone's searching, but then another optometrist is a half mile away, there's a good chance that they'll show up before you because they're closer. But that doesn't mean that you want to negate and not do all of these things. You want to give yourself the best possible chance to show up on the local SEO and the local organic components as well. So we have primary category, we've got additional categories, Google rankings. You may say, do I really have control over that? And you absolutely do. And I'll show you how in just a moment. And then also the completeness of your profile. So when you log into Google My Business, this is what you're going to see. Once again, this is my client's profile here. He was nice enough to let me show things off for you guys. You'll have your home, posts, info, insights, all these things on the left side. Nothing fancy there. And you'll have the different categories of everything. So when you go over here, you can actually see services. And this is where you can add not necessarily categories, but different services that you offer. So these are different things that he's actually added that have worked really well. George Costanza from Seinfeld, right? Why do I have this here? Well, we've talked about categories a little bit. And one thing I'll tell you is that whenever I was going to Academy, you can't make this up. I used to have a wallet that looked like this several years ago. I've kind of switched over to one of those slim wallets. And when I was going to Academy, the front part where I have my license was actually completely broken off and my license almost fell out before I got onto the airplane. So when I got to Boston, one of the first things I did is I started looking online because I knew I needed a new wallet pretty quickly. I didn't want to lose anything. So why am I talking about this, right? You're probably just kind of, scratching your head. I went to Amazon like everybody else does. And I started looking for the best wallet that fits my needs so I could have another new slim wallet. Well, what did I look for? Well, I looked for price, obviously, but then I also looked for reviews. This one here had 66,000 reviews and it had a 4.5 star. So what do you think? I bought this thing. Why? Because I know it's trustworthy. Do I know it's trustworthy myself? Absolutely not. I've never seen this thing in my hands. I've never used it. But for some reason, we as a society like to take the opinion of other people and we take it to hold as much truth as possible. You know, another funny example is just a few months ago, my parents were out in Missouri here, and they were asking me for a place to eat in town. So I gave them the name of three great places. We've lived here for 12 years. We know the places pretty well. You know, we have maybe 150 or 130,000 people in Columbia, so it's not a crazy big town, but we've been to a lot of the restaurants. So I give my mom a few of these different names, and what does she start doing? She starts looking on Google and looking at the reviews there. I was offended. You know, I've lived here my whole life, or for 12 years, I should say, rather, and she doesn't trust me, but she's trusting random people that are leaving reviews. This is the same exact premise with your practice and your website. You need reviews because people are absolutely going to look at them. Now, what's important about reviews is that the number and the quality matter. So you don't want to have like just 1 or 2 5-stars, or you don't want to have obviously 1 or 2 stars because that's going to look bad. But reviews in particular play a huge part for your Google rankings. I think it was 17% or whatever that number showed us on the last pie chart. So besides Google My Business, reviews are important. What I usually recommend people do is you get some sort of review software, and after a patient visits your practice, send them a text message. Because what's going to happen is that their visit with you is in their mind and it's very fresh for them. I always recommend doing text messages instead of emails because people are much less likely to read an email. However, if they get a text message, there's something about the psychology of it where they're texted, they feel almost obligated to an extent to follow up on that. Not to mention, too, people check their phone hundreds of times a day. So even if they don't leave that review right then and there, they're going to eventually get to it. You know, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but they have a much higher chance of opening your text message than they do your email. So definitely keep that in mind. Now, in terms of actually obtaining reviews, there are several different companies here. I did a quick poll on ODs on Facebook or finance, one of those things a while back. And these were some of the great results that I got from possible review software. Once again, I have absolutely no financial interest in these companies. I'm just listing them here so that you guys have a good opportunity to find some software that kind of works for you. Now, one thing that I've done with one of my clients as well is we created a separate page only for reviews. This is how blank the page is when you actually look at it. There's no header or menu up top. There's no footer on the bottom. There's absolutely nothing with the exception of these 3 options. And that's purposely done because when you get someone going to a page, you don't want them to be distracted by other things. The same thing goes for a landing page. You know, we talked just briefly about Google Ads. You want to have the user focus on one particular action. So when we're doing this, we set up this basic page for them, and we have it set up in that if they click great, they're going to go directly to Google to leave a review, hopefully a 5-star, obviously. If they click average, it brings them to a different web page where they say, thanks for your feedback, we appreciate it. If it's poor, we have them go to a contact form that's on their website to say, why was this a bad visit? What could we do better? So that way you can actually create a page on your website that does all this, and it helps filter reviews for your practice and helps maximize the number of 4- and 5-star ones that you can get. So here I have a little video that I constructed for you all. And what we're going to do is kind of show you a quick rundown of the Google My Business with the categories. So you'll see here, we're going to click on this little pencil icon first. And when we do that, you'll see primary category. That's optometrist, right? So that's what we want to do there. Then you have the option for the additional categories. And that's where you can change things to, okay, let me go back for just a moment there. So that's where you can change and add things for optician if you have an optical, eye care center, sunglasses, contact lenses. So you can add as many categories as you want to help improve your Google My Business listing. So you'll see that you have the address here. One thing that we also did for him as well is we added different service areas. So his primary area here is Ackworth, Georgia. And what you can do is add other surrounding vicinities. And that in itself will greatly help because it'll start pulling in to say, oh, I serve Kennesaw or I serve Woodstock, Georgia. all these different areas, Google's going to see that information. Yep, excuse me, I think I started it. Anyways, so you have the hours, you have the categories. You could talk about the health insurances that you have here as well, the different services like we showed. I'll ask you guys to excuse my voice. I'm starting to lose it. I was coaching basketball yesterday for a few hours and yelling at little 6 and 8 year olds. So my voice is starting to go a little bit. All right. So that's your Google My Business. Now we're done talking about that. The next thing is local citations. Now, if you remember that pie chart, we were talking about local citations. It was a very small part. It was only 7 or 8%. But this is something that used to be really big, and it's playing a little bit less of a factor nowadays, but it's still something that I would recommend everyone follow up with. And the reason being is that if you to improve your local citations, you really just need to spend a few $100s. And there are a lot of companies out there that do this for you. I have them listed here, Bright Local and Hoth. I find these two to be a little bit more on the expensive side. When I do this for my clients, I typically use Marketer Center. I find them to be the most cost efficient. And the whole premise of this and what a local citation is you want to put the information about your business out to different websites and to have them link back to yours. So we were talking about things before, like links and making sure that your practice is consistent between the name, address, and phone number. Well, the same goes through for this. I'll give you a good example. One of my clients who may be on this call, I'm not sure, I have not done any local SEO work for him. But when I ran a local SEO audit on citations, there were some inconsistencies. So for example, the way his website should be appearing in Yahoo Local and Yellow Pages and White Pages and all these things is as such. This is the name of his actual practice. So the blue one is what's accurate. But now you'll see is that there are small variations and differences of it based on the zip code in this one. And his name is at the beginning of this one here compared to this one. So these are all just small little idiosyncrasies that may affect search engine rankings ultimately. So whenever you do these audits, you want to try to make sure that your listings for your name of your practice, address, phone number are consistent all the way through. And another example right here is you see how this is 302 with parentheses. You want to try to make it the same way all the way across again. Whether it has a huge effect or not, it's tough to say because this has gotten a little bit more out of practice, but it's still something where if you spend a few $100s doing this, it's only going to help you. It's not going to hurt you at all. So there's two different types of citations. The ones that we're seeing on this page here are all structured citations. And that's where you have an actual citation that's in a very structured standpoint. So I own a pet store apparently on 555 Fake Street, and this is my address, okay, and my URL. There are also things called unstructured citations. And what that means is, let's say your practice was mentioned on a blog article for a local your Chamber of Commerce or something along those lines. Even if they mention your practice and they don't link to it specifically, you can still get citation credit in terms of Google because they're going to have enough details in there to say, well, you know what, Rich's Pet Store in Columbia, Missouri, there's not going to be that many Rich's Pet Stores, right? So little things like that can help as well. And this is just to show you that there are differences between structured and unstructured citations. Okay, so that is all there is for local map SEO right now. Now we're going to change gears a little bit and talk about local organic SEO. So once again, we're not talking about the maps anymore, but we're talking about this component right here on the right-hand side, where you have something called the meta title, which is the blue part. Then you have the meta description, which is the paragraph. Now, I'll tell you from the get-go that this meta description here plays essentially no effect whatsoever in your search engine rankings. With that being said, it's really important to have a good description because this is what people are going to see. So even though it may not actually affect your search engine rankings, it may very well affect what they call your CTR or click-through rate, because people want to find things and click on things that are applicable to them. So when we talk about local organic SEO, the number one factor is on-page SEO. So to make sure that your website has a lot of the content it has the keywords, it has all the things that you need on there to ensure that people can find the website and that Google can find it and index it properly. The next thing is links. You remember we talked briefly about that links are very hard to get, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we finish up with the organic SEO component. And then behavior, personalization, and GMB. I don't have a lot of information really about behavior and personalization. So the one thing I will say about those two is behavior in particular is something that is become a lot more pertinent with Google in the past year or two. And what I mean by this is behavior of how people react and click and work on your website. So if you think about something, the whole purpose of Google is to provide information. That is what they want to do. And when someone searches something, they want to get the user the most applicable and the best information possible. So if you start clicking on a website, or you start searching Best Eye Doctors Columbia, and you click on the first result, and you get to the website, and it's about dentists or chiropractors, or it's just not applicable to whatever you are, you're going to be on the website for just a few seconds, and you're going to back out, realizing that result wasn't good for you. Google realizes that, and Google tracks that information through their analytics. So the more that a person is on a website, or the more they click onto different components of it, for example, let's say I go to this advanced vision eye doctor one here. If I click on that and I go to their homepage, and then I click on the about section and I go to the doctor's profile and the staff's profile and the services, Google kind of records all these different clicks, and they see how long I'm spending on there. They how I'm clicking, where I'm going. The more you interact with the website, AKA the behaviors, the more Google is going to like it for your website. So you want to have people interact with your website as much as possible. So when we talk about organic signals, once again, we're kind of at the point where there are some things that you can control and some things that you cannot. So we're going to really focus on a lot of the stuff that you can control here, because that's the point of this lecture. I want to teach you how to do these things on your own. So when we talk about stuff, the first thing is the quality and authority of inbound links. What that means is that when other websites are linking to you, that's good, because you want to have essentially more people linking to you to say that this is an authoritative, a good content website. Number two is volume of the quality of content on there. So you always want to increase the amount of content that you have on your website. You want to keep things up to date for bios, for your staff, and for your doctors and so forth. How about keywords and anchor text? We'll talk about relevant keywords, geographic access, mobile friendliness, and so forth. Okay, number one, off-site quality authority. This is really important, like we just talked about. Now, I'll give you a great anecdotal evidence component here. I had a person reach out to me probably about 6 months to a year ago, and they were an optometrist it was either New York City or Brooklyn. Now, you can imagine by just in that area alone, there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of optometrists. She worked for an optical. And when you search for best opticians or opticians in New York City or Brooklyn or wherever it was, she actually ranked in the number like 6 or 7, which is insanely good. That's incredibly hard to do. So the question is, why? How did she get up there? Her website wasn't that spectacular. There was a lot of work that needed to be done. But to show you how important these authoritative links are, they had actually had a piece published about their practice in New York Times. And because New York Times linked back to their website, that gave them what we call SEO juice. So because of that link, their practice went flying up the rankings, and they're in the 6th or 7th spot of all the optometrists and all the opticals in New York City or Brooklyn, wherever it was. So once again, the more people that can link to you and to your practice, the better it's going to be. Now, one thing I will tell you is that if a website links to you and they don't have what they call good domain authority, meaning that they're not a very strong website, then that may help minimally or may even hurt you. And the reason this is important is that you don't want Joe's Crab Shack down the street linking to your website for the best optometrist in town if they have what they call domain authority of 1 or 2. So you can go to this resource here. This is a great option, and you can plug in your website, and that'll give you the power of your website. So when you look at this, websites like Google and Yahoo and Bing, they're going to be in the 90s or 95s. Realistically, when you look at the domain analysis and the domain authority of your own website, the best that I've usually ever seen for an optometrist is in that maybe high teen to low 20 mark. So you're never going to have the domain authority of New York Times and Business Insider, but the higher you are, the better it is. And this is important too, because if you start finding that you're getting links from other places, generally that's a great thing. But if you're finding links that are coming in from people that have really bad domain authority, then, domain authorities of 1 or 2, then you may want to get rid of those and ask them to remove them. So what you can do is when you find these links, run this in their analysis and see, does joescrabshack.com have a good domain authority? If not, ask them to get rid of the link for you. Okay, on-site SEO. We're talking about quality content. And this is one of the things that I basically preach to every single person I talk to about SEO. Google loves fresh content. The more content that you can write for your website, the more things that you can keep updated, the better you're going to do. And this has just been proven time and time again. There is an expression in the SEO world where content is king. And this is so valid for this. So not only does content really help you improve your Google search ranking though, but it also helps with your social media. Because what you can do is, let's say you create a blog post. Well, you put it on your Facebook and your Instagram and your Snapchat and TikTok and all those things. Anytime that you're posting content and creating content about your website, you want to share it to the world, because you're going to not only put this information out there, but you're going to basically put yourself as an industry expert. If you're the one posting about dry eye, low vision, keratoconus, scleral lenses, but when people start searching things in your area and they find your articles, who do you think they're going to go to? They're going to go to you as opposed to Joe Schmo down the street. So the more information that you can post about information about optometry articles and so forth, the better you'll be. So what I usually recommend doing is posting very regularly and consistently. What I've heard from several people is that they go to a lecture along these lines or something else, and they take this stuff home and they say, you know what, I'm going to create 15 different articles and we're going to post them all out there. Well, that's great and so forth, but it's really good to post on a regular, consistent basis. So if you're getting all gung-ho from this and you want to start producing content, do it regularly. So create your articles, but then every week or every 2 weeks, post one of them. Don't just do a mass upload and say, I'm posting all these articles all of a sudden. The reason this is important is that Google used different little things called robots and spiders and so forth. And what they're going to do is that maybe once every few weeks or once a month, they're going to send these little things to your website and they're going to say, did Bob's website change at all? Is it the same information that you have from last week or from last month or from 6 months ago? And if it is, you'll either stay the same in your rankings or you may drop down a little bit. But if you're posting new content every few weeks, then they're going to say, hey, you know what? Bob's website is doing great. They're posting more information about dry eye, AMD, glaucoma, scleral lenses, the new Vuity or Vuity, whatever it's called. They're talking about new important things. So they're going to put this information out there and they're going to start ranking you higher and higher. Now, one thing I have here is about an SEO plugin. And I use a content management system, or we call it a CMS. I use something called WordPress for all my websites, and it's the most popular thing to use across the entire world. If you do have a WordPress website, I would highly recommend using an SEO plugin, and I'll show you a few of those in just a moment here. But the purpose of an SEO plugin is that it's going to give you guidelines and help you formulate good information on your post. So that way you're hitting the proper keywords, you're hitting the amount of words that you actually want to have in there. So for example, you don't want to create a post that has 100 words. That's nothing. But if you can create a post that has 500 words or 700 or 1,000, that's going to be better for you ultimately. So the more words you have, the better it's going to be. Now, one thing I'll tell you is that pertinent content is very, very applicable to this. And what I mean by that is, as an optometrist, you want to post about all things optometry related to your practice. So, if you're a glaucoma specialist and that's all you do, I wouldn't post much about A&D necessarily. I'll give you a great example is I spoke to an ophthalmologist maybe about 2 months ago. He's a pediatric gastroenterologist, pretty specialized, obviously. And so he calls me saying that he needed a website. So we start talking about things, and he's like, well, actually, I don't need it for my practice. I want to start creating a blog, and then we're going to create my website for my pediatric gastroenterology practice down the road. But for his blog, he wanted to start talking about things like how to put a fence in and how to paint a house and all these different things that have absolutely nothing to do with pediatric gastroenterology. So he wanted to create this under his practice, and I was talking him out of it, saying, yeah, you may get a few website visits out of it, but this isn't the purpose of what your practice is going to ultimately be doing. So you want to create content that is applicable to what you do in your practice all the time. And then we're talking about pertinent keywords here. And we'll talk about that in detail when I show you this example. One of the questions that I do get very often is, well, what do I write about? And it can seem a little bit daunting because there's essentially endless topics and there's endless information. And people say, well, I can write about glasses one time, I can write about cataracts the next, but how many things can I write about? I suggest looking at this almost like a tree. So here's our trunk, we've got our eyeballs. Let's say our first branch is cataracts. So you can write an article just about cataracts, what cataracts are, what the symptoms are, and so forth. Well, I take that back because I have another twig here about symptoms, but you get the point. Our first article is going to be about cataracts. Then our next article can be about cataract surgery. Well, what are we going to do in that article? When we start talking about cataract surgery, we're going to link back to our original article on cataracts. Once again, Google likes to see behavior mechanisms in our practice and our websites. So if a patient is on your website reading about cataract surgery, and they're like, well, okay, I get this about cataract surgery, but what actually is a cataract? If you link back to what your cataract page is, they're going to click on that and they're going to stay on your website longer, and Google's going to like that. Same thing, cataract symptoms, AMD injections, low vision, you get the idea. You can do this with any facet of optometry and medical care. It works really, really well. We're going to get a little technical here, okay? So bear with me. There's something called anchor text. Now, you all know what anchor text is, but you may not have ever seen it in this way. Anchor text is simply the blue hyperlink that you see when you go to a website. Every single one of us has seen this. Now, what's important is that in terms of an SEO standpoint, you want the anchor text to be different from one reference to another. So for example, I created this fake website. Maybe it's not fake, I don't know, but I created this. And the link to the website is columbiaoptometrist.com. And the anchor text, the part that would be blue, like up in here, is Columbia Optometrist. So that's great because that makes a lot of sense. But what Google likes to see is they like to see variation in the anchor text too. They don't want to just see this same terminology and same phrase throughout the entire internet, but they would want to see put Columbia eye doctors here or best optometrists in Columbia here instead. They like to see variations that link back to the same URL. So why am I talking about this and why is this important? Well, if you start finding that you have links coming into your website, which is great, but they're all saying the same exact thing, like your practice name or something along those lines, reach out to those companies and say, hey, thank you so much for putting this information on your blog or your post, but would you mind just changing this to best optometrist in Columbia or eye doctor in Missouri? Having that variation there will help your SEO overall. Okay. The next thing, topical keyword relevance. Now, once again, as we go through this, we're getting a little bit more technical. So bear with me because things are going to take a little bit more of a dive here. There's something called short tail versus long tail. And this is really important. And I want you to think about this example. Let's say you start a new website and you're selling shoes. Well, if you try to type in shoes as your primary keyword, what are the odds that you're going to rank for the word shoes? It's nil. It's not going to happen because you're going to have other companies like Zappos and Amazon and I don't know, Shoe Carnival. They're going to be all ahead of you, right? However, that's a short term. So shoe or shoes, that's a very short terminology. What if you do something longer? Like let's say you specialize in selling red Nike shoes size 11. That's a long tail keyword. So the competition for that specificity is much, much less. You're going to have a much greater chance of ranking for a long tail keyword than you do a short tail keyword. So keep that in mind when you're creating your content on your website. The more long tail you can have, the better it is. The reality is that, let's say you're typing in best optometrist in Columbia, Missouri, or eye doctor, Columbia, Missouri. That's a long tail keyword. But in that keyword, you also have optometrist, you have Columbia. So when you look at them individually, yes, you're going to have those short tail keywords in there, but you're also going to have a longer phrase that you can get more hits off of from the search engines as well. I have here something called Every Letter Matters, and I'll show you a great example of that in just a moment. I say use Google to your advantage. I'm going to show you a good example of that. And then the last thing is love thy neighbor, because you don't want to really take advantage of people that are down the street from you. You don't want to steal traffic from Dr. Smith or Dr. Jones down the street, do you? Oh, absolutely. Yes, you do. I don't say love thy neighbor. I say steal from thy neighbor. This is SEO. You need to know what your neighbors and what your competition is doing and take traffic from them. Some people say, you may think, maybe this is a little unethical. It absolutely is not. This is how people work, and this is how search engine optimization works. You need to find what works well for other people and apply that in your own practice. And I'm going to show you an actual example of this in just a moment as well as we move forward. So long tail keywords, here's a great example of it. I typed in the word glasses. Now, keep in mind that these are a few months old here when I originally created this, so the actual structure and the hierarchy here may be a little different. But I typed in just glasses in a local search result, and what came up? Well, you have the dreaded Warby Parker and Zenni and goggles for you and so forth. So you're nowhere up in the near 4 or 5 top rankings here. Now, granted, these are all ads. So once again, short tail keyword, not doing too much. The next thing, glasses, Columbia, Missouri. Well, when I do that, now we start getting the snack pack here. We have the local map results, aka the snack pack, and we're starting to see some of the options down here under America's Best and Lens Crafters and a corporate place called iMart Express. What about next? Columbia, Missouri optometrist. So just by changing a few different letters and search queries here, you can see how things are different. Now we have private practices here. We have Williams and Associates, we have Andrew Stone, and then America's Best. So by changing the information that we're putting in our search query, it's going to change the results significantly. And I even used to have examples where I put eye doctor versus eye doctors, Columbia, Missouri. Once again, one little difference, the letter S changes the results. So you want to have variations of these things throughout your copy on your website. Oh, here it is. So once again, you see the difference here. We've got eye doctor, Columbia, Missouri, eye doctor, Columbia, eye doctor, Columbia MO for Missouri, eye doctor, Columbia, Missouri. And there's a little bit of a change even in the Google ads here in Mason Eye versus Family Focus. I'm sorry, not Google ads, the snack pack. And then when we change it to optometrist, Columbia, Missouri. So once again, changing these keywords is an important component for what you need to do. So I said use Google. Well, a lot of times when people do search engine optimization research, you start thinking about having pricey software that costs $100 a month or something along those lines. And that stuff is very, very good to have, but you don't necessarily need it. And the reason why is that you can use Google and just its regular free search queries to get information about what people are searching locally for you. So I just typed in here, glasses, Columbia, Missouri. So that's going to come up. Then you're going to get variations of it too. Eyeglasses, cheap glasses, glasses repair, prescription glasses. So by typing in variations of the search queries of what you think people are going to start searching for, you can get ideas of what you should put in your content as well. Okay. I don't want to go out and show you this quite yet because I want to make sure I don't have trouble getting back into the presentation, but we'll do this first after we finish the actual presentation. And I'm going to show you how to steal traffic from your neighbors. Okay. What I have found doing all the work that I have over the course of the past several years owning the company and so forth is that these are the primary long tail keywords that you want to focus on for your practice. So the more information you can have in there about eye exam, Columbia, Missouri, eye doctor, Columbia, Missouri, optometrist, Columbia, Missouri, focus on these. These are going to be the big ones that you need. And if you can start putting this into your content, your rankings will go up higher. You'll get more clicks. You're going to get more visits to your website and more people coming into your practice. So there's a really good free resource as well. It's called Google Search Console. And my experience is that a lot of practice owners aren't actually familiar with this. They may have it set up through their webmaster and so forth, but it's something that you should have access to and you should take a look at every few months. And this is something that Google essentially runs. What they do is you can put in your website and show that you own the domain, and it'll show you how people are actually finding your practice. So this is an orthodontist that I work with in town here. I don't do any SEO work for him or anything, so I wanted to kind of keep it neutral. And when we type that in, his practice name is Central Missouri Orthodontics. And you can see he's gotten 128 clicks out of 463 impressions. The impressions is how often that comes up in the search results when people type in orthodontist Columbia, Missouri. So he's getting a pretty good click rate here, about 25%, give or take. Then orthodontist Columbia, Missouri, Central Missouri Orthodontics. You can see how things play out here. And you can also change the date from 3 months to 6 months to year and so forth. But this is a great free resource. I would definitely recommend taking a look at. Okay, once again, getting a little technical here. When we talk about topical keywords, we're talking about things that you're going to put on your website. So for example, eye doctor, Columbia, Missouri, optometrist, Columbia, Missouri, your practice's name. These are topical keywords that you want to put in your website, but you don't want to just put it in there willy-nilly. There's a certain way you want to put it in. And anytime your website was developed, if it was somebody that did a decent job, they would have used different components of hierarchy on the website. And what I mean by that is that there's terminology called meta tags, something called a header or a header one. This is the most important part of the website. So when we were before looking at the organic results on Google, where it said advanced vision, that advanced vision was the header one. That's the title of the page. That's the most important terminology for the website. Now, on that website itself, there's going to be other categories underneath it. So it's not just going to say advanced vision, but it's going to say our services that we offer, our glasses, our contact lenses. You want to create those sub-services as important things too, but maybe not as important as header one. You want to make those header twos. Things that are less important than that, you want to make header threes and fours and so forth. So you can see how this graph here, header one is most important, then header two, then three and four and so forth. Here's another example that may kind of make it a little bit easier for you to understand too. This is an actual kind of boilerplate or a template for a website. Now, right here, what they have is how to grow magnificent trees. So if this is the name of a blog or the title of a blog, this is what it's called, and it's the H1 or the most important component. What's next? H2, tips for growing healthy trees. So right now, if you look at this, I want you to think about what the keywords for this website and this post may be. Well, they're definitely going to have the word trees in there, right? Because we're seeing that both in the header one and the header two. But my guess is that you're probably talking about grow trees or growing trees, some variation of that, because you're seeing that terminology, those keywords in both the H1 or header one and the header two down here. When we look a little further down, we have some H3 and we have another H3 down here, growing trees by region. So if I were a betting man, I'd say their terminology and their keywords that they're looking for on this are growing trees or grows trees, some variation of that. But you can see how when we're doing this, we want to do this in a very systematic and structured way, where the H1 is the most important component. From there, H2 is the secondary, H3 is tertiary, and so forth. So before, we were talking about how to use an SEO plugin or a search engine optimization plugin. Now, once again, I work exclusively in WordPress. So these are only applicable to this. But one of the results I saw recently was that I think 35 to 36% of all the websites across the entire world are WordPress based. So there's a very good chance that your website is based in WordPress. If it is, I would very much strongly look into some of these plugins here. These are all absolutely free. I'll tell you that Yoast is by far the most popular across the entire world. I would not recommend using that one though, because it's pretty limited. Rather, I would use one called Rank Math, which is an excellent free one. They offer a lot of variations on what you can do and a lot of flexibility. Yoast is very, very limited. So I would go with Rank Math if you have the option of picking one here. There are also excellent other free ones here. Any of these are great. I actually use what they call SEO Press. I use a premium version of this one that is really, really good too. So let me show you how to use one of these plugins briefly. Once again, we're getting very technical here, but if you kind of go through this in a systematic fashion, you can kind of get an idea of what we're doing. So when we look at the plugin itself and we start looking at the information, here's what we're looking at. Our keyword that we're trying to focus on this example is SEO steps. So that is the main terminology and the main keyword that we're going to have throughout our entire website and our blog post, for example. So what you want to do is make sure that keyword is showing up in your title. Get these SEO steps into your routine. Perfect. The next thing, I don't want you to worry about the slug. That's not really important for what you need. You want to ensure that the focus keyword is in your meta description. Once again, this is that paragraph area that you see on the Google search results. Now, this is not going to influence your actual Google ranking really at all, but it's something that if people start seeing this and they're searching for SEO steps, they'll see it in your description and they're more likely to click on your page or your post. The beauty of all these SEO plugins is that they really do a great job of helping you figure out what you need to do and change on your content on your website to make sure that you have the best possible chance of your information showing up to the search results. So for example, we have the terminology, again, SEO steps right here. Now, this result is telling us that the keyword does not appear in the first paragraph of the copy. That's important because what you want to do is you want to make sure that if you're using this keyword, that you talk about SEO steps in your first paragraph of your content, because people are reading this. They want to make sure that what they're reading is pertinent to what they're actually researching. They have keyword density here. How often do you use this terminology, SEO steps, in your actual post? If this is what you're focusing on and your keyword density is very low, meaning you don't have this terminology throughout your post a lot, then it's not as applicable. So once again, this is not an end-all be-all, but the more green lights that you typically have here, the better it's going to be for you. There's some foreshadowing for you. Okay, next thing, geographic keyword relevance. This is something that I've started doing more recently, and it works really well. And I'll show you an example of this just in a second here. But what you can do is you can take your most common services, glasses, contact lenses, macular degeneration screenings, visual fields, whatever it is, dry eye. Take your most common services and you can create pages on your website that are outside your normal area of practice. So here's an example. I live in Columbia, Missouri. We have a population of 130,000 people or something along those lines. Well, for my actual website, I don't want to focus just on Columbia, Missouri. I want to make sure people in other cities and other areas actually see my services too. Now, if there are other places that offer what I offer locally to where they live, they're more apt to see it. But what you can do is you can create pages on your website that show about the services you offer in that vicinity or in that city, and you have a better chance of ranking higher for those services there. I'll show you an example just right now. So once again, my company name, my parent company is Como Web Designs. Now, Como stands for Columbia, Missouri. It's kind of an acronym for where we live. In my main web page, I have web design and digital marketing in Columbia, Missouri. But what I did is I created a different page that I actually don't even include on this menu. And I changed the text to say Jefferson City, and then I included Jefferson City in the description here. And what happened? In just a few months, I came up as the #2 result for Jefferson City, which is absolutely amazing because there are a lot of people that do what I do with web design and SEO and Google Ads and so forth. There's a lot of people. So the fact that this actually worked so well speaks highly about how efficient this can be for you. So once again, take your services, dry eye, glaucoma, AMD, glasses, and let's say you live in, I don't know, not gonna even try to make an example, but you get the idea. Try to make other pages on your website for other cities or other neighborhoods of where you live. That'll give you the better chance of ranking higher in those vicinities for it. So we spoke earlier about mobile-friendly websites and how in 2018, things kind of started changing a little bit. And this has become very, very prominent now. If your website is not mobile-friendly, you are not going to rank well. This is not an opinion, this is fact. So you need to make sure that your website is mobile-friendly and that it's applicable to what Google search results want. This is an excellent free resource. You can go right here and test your website, make sure it's mobile-friendly. If it's not, I would highly recommend you find somebody to redo your website for you and make sure that it's mobile-friendly afterwards. When you talk about mobile-friendly, there's different components that you need to focus on. Number one is optimized scaled images. Now, I'll hop forward for just a second. For those of you who have ever heard me lecture before, I do a lot of stuff on vascular disease, artery occlusions, vein occlusions, carotid disease, and so forth. So this is one of my favorite pictures. And this is a picture of a patient that had 14 Holland horse plaques in their eye. And you can see that they had a little plaque right here with a cotton wool spot or small occlusion afterwards. So you probably can't see all 14 plaques, but when we looked on the actual picture, they were there. Now, the reason I'm showing this is that this is a gigantic image. It's probably several thousand pixels in size. This is important because if you're downloading a picture for your website, you probably don't need one that's this big. If you're using one, if you're trying to actually download a picture that only needs to be this big, well, then make it that big. You do not need to have a picture this big on there the entire time because that's going to eat up your server resources and it's going to make it slower for your page to load. So scaled, optimized images are really important. The next thing is reliable and fast hosting. There is a company out there that has Danica Patrick, or used to have Danica Patrick as a spokeswoman. I would avoid that company at all costs for website hosting. They are notoriously very, very slow. And I'll show you an example of that in just a moment as well. So get a good, fast host for your website. And you're talking literally a difference of a matter of a few dollars per month. Some websites might be as $2 or $3 for hosting. Most of the good ones that you're going to spend money on, probably $5 to $10 per month. You're not talking about breaking the bank here. So fast hosting is really good. I recommend two companies. The one that I use for a lot of mine is called Name Hero. They do an excellent job. Another one that's very popular is called SiteGround. Excellent, excellent companies. I've had very good experiences with both of them. So here's a great example of this Danica Patrick company that we were talking about. So this is one of my clients, and what we did is we were redoing parts of their website for him. And I took a copy of it, and we used this program called GT Metrics. It's a great profile that tells your practice or your website how well it's doing in terms of speed, how fast it loads, and so forth. So just as there were on GoDaddy, we got a grade of E, which is very poor, very bad low speeds. We have a load speed of about 4.5 seconds to the largest contentful paint, meaning that's how long it took for the first big image here to actually show up. Then I copied that to my servers, which I use Name Hero for a lot of mine. And just by doing that alone, I didn't change anything else. Just by copying it over, we improved our letter a little bit, and we dropped by about 1.5 seconds in our page speed load. So that's pretty decent. Then what I did is I used something called a cache plugin. And this basically takes a copy or a snapshot of your website and it stores it locally so that when someone goes to it later on, they can load it much faster. So by doing these two things only, I didn't change anything else. I didn't change a single thing on the pictures and the images, text. That's all I did. We got them down to a 1.8 second speed from 4.5. Now you're maybe thinking, okay, you saved maybe 3 seconds. Is that really a big deal? And the answer is absolutely yes. Not only does page speed make a big difference for your SEO rankings, but think about it from an actual usability standpoint too. When was the last time that you clicked on a website or a link and you're just sitting there on your phone and you're waiting for it to load and load and load? And after 3 or 4 seconds, what do? You get out of there because you're not waiting that long. Nobody has 4 seconds in their life, right? So if your website can load fast, you're going to have more people that get to it, more people that are going to interact with it. So we mentioned before that there are things that you can control and things that you cannot control. So here are some things. We talked about domain authority. You really don't have a lot of control over that. Keywords in your Google My Business landing page title, again, don't have a lot of control. And then links. I think I have about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to things here, especially the live examples and how to show you how to steal traffic from your neighbors and so forth. One thing I'll say about these core web vitals, this is very, very technical, is maybe about a year ago, Google came out with these different things called first contentful paint, largest contentful paint. All this really means is they want your website to load fast, and they want people to be able to interact with it nicely. So if you load your website and things are shifting all around, that's bad for the user experience. But if you can get your website to load fast and make it so that someone can actually interact with it as fast as possible, that's what you want to see. The last thing we'll talk about from an organic SEO standpoint is link building. So there are two different components of this. It's called white hat and black hat. You may hear about this, and you've probably all gotten emails from people from foreign countries saying, I can improve your SEO in 3 months. That's not the way this actually works in real life. But there are going to be people that reach out to you that try to get you to do SEO techniques that are black hat, and you will absolutely be penalized by Google for. So let's take a quick look at this. White hat SEO. This is something that is good. You want white hat SEO. This is something that you are going to apply to your practice by building content, by building links organically. And you want to have links that are getting sent to your website from other people. So we talked about these links before from Joe's Crab Shack and from Dr. whatever. This is something you want to do on a regular basis. And the best and easiest way to do this is to reach out to people in your community and be involved in your community. So one of the things that I've done with my own website company is we sponsor Fitness for a Cure at a local gym. So I'm going to write a blog post about how we're being a sponsor for this, and I'm going to ask them to link back to mine. So what's going to happen is that when they link back to my website, I'm going to get SEO juice and SEO power because I'm getting a link from another good domain authority website. So get involved locally, write blogs about that, post them on your website, and ask them to link to you. Now, you may be saying to yourself, I just said before that you want to post only about things that are applicable to your practice. Well, this is something that you're doing in your local community. Google loves local search stuff. This is a very applicable thing, even if it's not related directly to optometry in itself, okay? There's another thing called Help a Reporter Out, or HARO. This is a really good way to also get links to your website. And what you can do is sign up for this. It's also totally free. And you'll get emails about different things that you can kind of put your opinion on. So if a reporter is trying to write an article about dry eye disease, they'll send an email to people saying, hey, can anybody help me out about an article about dry eye? You can write a 2 or 3 sentence response. And if they pick you, you'll maybe write a little bit more to it, and they'll link to you guys on a website. And stuff like that is a great way to do it. Black hat. These are techniques you want to avoid. Keyword stuffing, synonyms, and so forth. You don't want to have a lot of different synonyms on your website, such as we are the best eye doctor / optometrist / ophthalmologist / optician in Columbia, Missouri. Google is going to realize that you're using synonyms and not building natural fluid content. So keep it natural, okay? Keyword cloaking is something that's really gone by the wayside, but it is still out there. And what that means is that, let's say on this what you're looking at right now, we have this pirate hat, we have this white background. What people used to do maybe 10, 15 years ago is if I was trying to build a website for pirate hats, I would have the word pirate hat in white font on the white background throughout this entire thing. So that way that word pirate hat is just there all over the place. Google got smart to that, and they realized, hey, if the actual text is the same color as the background, that's not something that we're trying to do. So make sure you're not doing that, or that your web people aren't doing that for you too. There are also things called private blog networks and sneaky redirects and all this. I'm not going to get into it just for a lack of time. But just understand that from a black hat standpoint, you want to do things organically. You want to build your SEO content properly. If you start employing some of these black hat techniques, Google will eventually find out and you will drop down significantly in rankings. So make sure you're doing things the right way. There's also gray hat, which is kind of a combination. This stuff is still very quote unquote legal in SEO world. And what the easiest way to kind of go about this is let's say you created a post a year ago about macular degeneration. You can actually go back to that old post and create a portion underneath that that says update. And then you can add more content to it about new things in macular degeneration treatments or new testing protocols and so forth. So yeah, you can certainly create a new article about it, but you can also add link to old ones. And all that's really good to do too. So we spent a long time talking about all this stuff from SEO. Let me show you what I'm actually talking about. I do have an actual link here too. That way, if you all want to watch this, I created a separate video that you can just put this into your web address. It'll show you exactly what I'm going to do now as well, so you can review later on. Okay, so let me show you how to steal from your neighbor first. This right here is a program called Uber Suggest. I absolutely love it. It shows a lot of really good free information. Now, I use that Advanced Vision Columbia, the one that we were talking about earlier. I use them as the example because when I typed in eye doctor Columbia, last night even, they came up as the #1 result. So they're doing great. So I'm going to show you how to steal some of his traffic. What you're going to do is you'll type that in, you get this information here. And don't worry about the traffic overview or anything. It shows you the domain authority, like we talked about before, usually high teens, low 20s. It also shows you backlinks, so how many times people are linking to your website, and you can actually click on this to find out who exactly is linking. But later on down on the bottom, you'll see SEO keywords. This is what you want to focus on. So I want you to pay attention to the volume, the position, and the visits. So all this information here is going to be pertinent for you because you want to try to find the keywords that have the most volume and the most visits. So for example, do I want to type in Advanced Vision Columbia, Missouri in my search results for my website? No, because that's not the name of my practice. But I want to find ones that are more generic, more non-branded. So optometrist, Columbia, Missouri. There's 480 searches going on for this on an average week, or an average month rather, and he's getting 245 of those. So you can bet that if I were creating my practice website, I would make this as one of the primary terms so I can steal some of these visits from him. What else? Eye doctor, Columbia, Missouri. There's 1,000 volume searches and he's getting 61 of them. So I'll tell you, if you just start going through this and putting this information into your actual website where it's pertinent in the H1, H2, H3 headers, you will see a drastic improvement in how you're actually ranking. Yep. Hang on, I got lost here. Okay, I've got a few minutes left here, I believe. So I want to show you two different things. This is a website that I created, and it's actually just a dummy website. It's not real, but I want to show you how you can change these components on your H1, H2, H3, and make it pertinent for what you want to do. So here is my H1, Pinnacle Eye Associates. And, I think we can all say this is a nice, nice looking website. It's modern, it's clean, all that stuff. But this is really bad from an SEO perspective, and I'll show you that in just a moment. When we look here, Pinnacle Eye Associates is the name of my fictional practice. So that's my H1, and that's not going to change. Here under it, I care for you and your family. That's my H2. Now, okay, maybe that's okay. But what if I wanted to actually focus on my area in Columbia instead? Well, we'll get to that and I'll show you. Then we have here, we're here to help, optical services, open access. These are all H3s. They're nice little text titles, but it doesn't tell you anything, and it's not going to help Google tell you anything instead. So you see where I'm going here. Let me show you how this actually works from an SEO perspective too. Now, don't mind the formatting here because it's not a larger screen. It's just got a little messed up. But what I'm going to do is scroll down here, and here's what I did. This is that rank math plugin I was showing you, okay? I used the terminology eye exams and Columbia. Those are my two focus keywords here. And what I want to do is I'm using these keywords because those are the terms that I want to primarily focus on for people to get to search me for my business. You can see here, I got a 31 out of 100, which is pretty poor. So how can we improve that? Well, if we look at the pattern down below, we said the focus keyword doesn't appear in the SEO title. Okay, maybe we can fix that. We don't have the focus keyword in our meta description, but then we did get check marks for these other three things. So if we look at our SEO title, here it is. It's Pinnacle Eye Associates, which is the name of the practice. That's great, right? But we can also change this and we can fix it so that we include eye exams in Columbia, and that will help our SEO ranking as well. Then we also have, we help patients in completing their out-of-network benefit forms, blah, blah, blah. So once again, eye exams and Columbia are our keywords here, and we didn't do very well with our ranking. So here's another page that I created, and I just copied exactly what we had, but I just changed some of the text where it's pertinent. So once again, we have an H2 here, the second most important things. So I instead included, where it was before, eye exams for you and your family, I changed it to eye exams and glasses in Columbia, Missouri. Well, just in that alone, I'm creating and I'm using two of our keywords, eye exams and Columbia. If we go down a little further, instead of having, let me see what we had here. Okay, so I didn't even have a heading here. So by adding an additional heading, eye exams and services, we're getting our eye exams terminology in there again. Then we changed the terminology here, medical eye exams, optical and glasses services, vision insurance. You can see how these are much more applicable than what we have here. As we go down a little further, once again, Columbia's home for eye care instead of just about us. So having these terminologies in here and these focus keywords is going to improve our SEO. It's going to make us rank better. So let's see how we actually did. On our original one, we are at a 31. And just by changing that alone, I didn't change anything else. Let me see if I can find it. Hang on. Technical difficulties, bear with me. Okay, so just by changing those two things alone, or those few things, we went from a 31 to an 88 out of 100. Once again, this is not an end all be all. This is not going to say you're 100% going to get into #1 or #2 ranking. But these are important things for you to do on your website to give you the best possible chance. Okay. So before we had Pinnacle Eye Associates, and that was all we had. But I added here eye exams in Columbia, Missouri. I'm a lot more likely to get clicks to my website because I'm being very open and being straightforward about what we do and where we're located. People are going to click on this more if they know this information. I also changed our meta description. Once again, this has nothing to do with our actual SEO keyword ranking, but when we have this information about where we are and the eye exams as an important component of our description, people are more likely to click on this. So you can see that just by changing that, we made a huge improvement. You might be saying to yourself, okay, well, you still got an 88. How come you didn't get 100? And the reason being is that this is a home page. This is a landing page. This isn't something that is supposed to have 4,000 words on it because nobody's going to want to read that. I did create an actual page also that is a post, and I just called it 5 ways to improve your local SEO. And our terminology here is, there we go. We have local SEO and Google Maps. Those are my keywords. So you can see that by doing this, I've got a very long article that's about 2,000 words, somewhere around there. I have enough of the information in there between having the terminology, local SEO, and Google Maps throughout all over the place that we're getting now a 98 out of 100, which is pretty dang good. So overall, this is how you can use an SEO plugin in your own actual practice This is how you can apply it and do it yourself. You don't need to hire somebody to do this for you. This is not hard to do. So I think that's all I have. Let me go back to my thing here for just a moment. Okay, so a few last quick things. These are completely free resources for you. You don't have to pay a dime for any of these things, but it can help you with your mobile responsiveness, your Google My Business like we talked about, Search Console, Tiny PNG we didn't talk about. This is a great tool for image compression. And what that essentially is let's say you download a picture online that's 1.5 MB or 2 MB. If you put that image into Tiny PNG, it'll drop it down significantly. So you're not using as big of an image on your website, and your website will load faster. I talked about WordPress a little bit. Here's what I use for virtually all of my my plugins and so forth. Or no, excuse me, that's my, I'm getting confused here. Bear with me. So here are free WordPress plugins that I recommend for a lot of people. Yoast SEO we talked about is good. Rank Math is excellent. Optimal is a great plugin because that will help decrease the size of your images and also compress them. If you don't have security on your website, we didn't even talk about that. WordFence is an excellent security that's free. There are premium paid options for that too. And then Malcare is a very good free option too. We talked about Ubersuggest. If this is something that you are interested in doing and learning more about for yourself for SEO, I highly recommend this book. I know what you're thinking. I don't want to read a book about SEO that sounds incredibly boring. I'll tell you that this book is great. The author does a really good job of keeping things in a very easy to understand fashion. It's not technical very well. It's a really good book to write. This is what I use for all of my websites in particular, SEO Press Pro, iTheme Security Pro, and some other stuff. So once again, I think that's all I have for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm absolutely happy to respond and kind of field your questions and kind of help you, direct you in the right direction. So once again, thanks again, Stephanie and Wu University. This has been an absolute pleasure being able to talk with you guys today.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing so much information. And it's really impressive to me that, you're not only are you a doctor, but you have figured out not only how all of this website and SEO and plugins and all these things that you've been educating us on, you've not only figured out the basics, but I mean, I would say you are a master at some of this stuff. And some of these things are like so beyond me. And I remember learning about digital marketing and just even website development. And I thought, you know what, it's going to take me personally probably months to throw together like the most basic website. And so I'm like, forget it. I'm just hiring this to someone because I absolutely have no desire to do this. So absolutely amazing presentation with incredible tips. I mean, so many people are going to go home and take these away and can start answering or implementing this into their own practices right away. But we do have some questions if you have a couple minutes.
Sure, absolutely. Let's see.
Okie dokie. So we've got Dr. Brill, and he asks a question on, or he has a comment and says, absolutely amazing presentation. And he wants to know, how do you use the Alexa.com rankings for your website?
So Alexa.com, Google's AI, Siri, and all that, they're all the same. They may have slightly different algorithms, but they're all going to be incredibly local search based. So I would say that if you can implement a lot of the local map SEO features that we talked about before, that's going to give you the best chance to get found on the AI versions of text-to-speech stuff.
Great. Another question from Dr. Zeldin. Does a Google My Business have to be locked into a certain location, or is it possible to transfer the profile specifically so that you can keep your reviews if you change your physical location?
That's a great question, and I don't know for sure. I can tell you that I've had a few people try to make changes like that, and I've heard that it can be very difficult and painstaking. So you would have to work with Google in particular about it. I would imagine And I'll take a quick step back and say, to set up a Google My Business profile, what you do is you kind of log into that URL that I sent you, and you put your practice's information there. And in a week or two, they'll send you this little postcard with this digit on there that you go in there and you enter what it is, basically, and tell them that this is your practice. You own this actual physical location. I would imagine that it's going to be a little difficult to do, but that if you're just changing your actual proximity and your address, then the same components would apply, where you just have to essentially re-verify with Google. Hopefully that's as easy as it is, but I can't say for sure.
Great, thank you. Another comment from Dr. Brill. I heard that .edu backlink is the best one you can get, and how do you get one?
So 2 comments about that. I made mention about not using GoDaddy as a host. One question I had at Academy, which was a great question, is can you use them for domain registrar, or can you buy your website URL through that? And absolutely, yes, you can. It is totally fine to use GoDaddy for those services. I just would personally stay away from using them from hosting where your actual website is hosted. To kind of clarify this, because some people get these confused, if you imagine your physical address where your house is, that's your domain address, idoctor.com. How your house is built in your actual house, that's your hosting. So you can buy your physical address with GoDaddy, just don't build your house with it, okay? I'm sorry, well, I got sidetracked. What was the question again?
It was, let me see, let me go back to it here. I think I put it in this answered box. The edu backlinks.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So what they've really found in the past few years is that the site extension, meaning .edu, .org, .net, .com, it doesn't make that much of a difference ultimately in terms of search rankings. EDUs and .orgs and .coms tend to have historically had the best domain authority associated with it. But just because you build a website on .net instead of .com, it doesn't mean you won't rank well. I would only use a .edu for something if you are using a university. So like WooU, technically you can probably get by with a .edu on that. But I wouldn't do that for an actual private practice because it doesn't make a lot of clinical sense.
No, that makes sense. Dr. Wong wants to know, how do you create your own blog?
So that's a very loaded question, in the fact that it depends on how your website is set up. If you're using something like Wix or Squarespace, they probably have an area in there to create your own posts and so forth. But let me show you here real quick. Okay, so this is what the back of WordPress looks like. And without getting, once again, very technical on it, there are different things on the left-hand side. Pages are generally ones that you're going to do and include on your menu on the homepage. Posts are essentially blogs. So posts and blogs are the same exact thing. So in WordPress, what I can tell you what you do is you go there, you click Add New, and you go to Town. So I'm going to put, fake title here. That's going to be the title of my blog post. And then you start writing your content in here. And when you're doing this blog post, you write all your content. And then if you're using an SEO plugin like this, you're going to put your focus keywords in here. Okay. And it'll kind of give you information as you're going through. So I can really only speak on how to do this from a WordPress standpoint, because this is what I use exclusively. But virtually any other content management system that you're going to use will have a very similar pattern in general.
Yep. Excellent. Dr. Barnes wants to know, if we currently use a website management company, do we ask them if they are doing these things, especially the SEO plugins, because they're not managing the website themselves?
So I think it certainly helps to reach out. And I would imagine that virtually any SEO company that you're hiring, if they're local or they're in the United States, I would be very hard pressed to believe they're using black hat techniques, the things we said to avoid. If you're hiring someone that is international, that may be doing that. So I would say, get with your SEO expert and find out what they're doing and say, hey, why are we doing this? And try to get some background on things. If you're trying to talk to them and they're getting defensive about what they're doing, that might be a red flag for you. So just try to have an open, honest conversation with them and say what they're doing from an SEO perspective, why they're doing it, and hey, how can we even further improve things?
Yeah. And another thing is, hopefully you're meeting with them each month, or somebody from your team is, and they can kind of go through some of the data and the metrics with you, because they can actually physically show you kind of some of the progress. I think that's important too.
Yeah. And especially if you're doing SEO work and you're having that done through a company, it's important to get search ranking updates every month, every 3 months or so, somewhere around that range. I generally do every 3 months with a lot of my clients, because what happens is that search results and rankings they're variable. They're never going to be the same. Even if you fully maximize one thing as best as you possibly can, there are going to be some months where it dips down. That's just the way that Google works. So I like to do over a longer period of time to show the more greater stability of things.
Great. Yeah, that's a good comment, because sometimes I'll meet with my people and then I'm like, oh my God, it was lower this month. What happened? So maybe I should start meeting with them less. Question on, do you recommend paying for ad on my Google My Business page or boosting posts on Facebook?
So Google My Business is now doing some ads where you can actually improve your rankings on the local search map results. I haven't done that yet myself, but I've seen it before, and I think it might be worth trying out. In the fact that if you can get your information up a little higher and it's not terribly expensive, I say go for it and give it a shot. From a Facebook post standpoint, I would not recommend that. And I've done a few social media campaigns for social ads and so forth. And I'll tell you that Facebook marketing in generally is much less expensive than Google Ads is. So that's a good thing about it. But generally speaking, if you're just boosting a post, so let's say you're doing a post about dry eye again, if you're boosting that to get that out to more people, are more people going to really click on that? Probably not. But if you're doing a social media campaign that's saying, hey, this is the new year, use your VSP benefits, use your Medicare, use these things. That's something that I would be more apt to want to boost, because you're going to have more likelihood of people clicking on that and coming to you as an actual client or patient than just boosting some sort of blog post necessarily.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. I think sometimes people get confused, because if you boost an ad that, let's say it's for dry eye, that doesn't necessarily increase you on SEO, but it might get more clicks to your website, but it's not really going to help your rankings necessarily. Yeah. So thanks for explaining that.
Yeah. And one other comment about that too. We didn't talk about Google Ads really at all. If you're going to use Google Ads or Facebook ads or LinkedIn ads, whatever the case is, absolutely make sure that you have a dedicated page on your website specifically for that. You do not want to have your homepage as your landing page, meaning that if you're running a Google ad, you don't want people coming to your homepage. You want to create a specific page that doesn't have a menu up top. They don't have a footer on the bottom. It's just your page of content that you want the patient to take a specific action. So, for example, if you look at any sort of really successful Google ad, if you click on that, oftentimes there's going to be one thing for you to do. Buy now, try our 7-day free trial, something along those lines. You're not going to get overwhelmed with potential options, because a Google ad serves one purpose. It's to convert a patient online to a patient in your chair.
Yep. So okay. Wow. I did not know that. Great advice. From Dr. Kreshmar, what is the main advantage of having a secured website opposed to unsecured?
So as of, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, Google basically essentially mandated that they want every website to be HTTPS. If you don't have that S, meaning that your website is not secure, then what's going to often happen is that you go to a page and it'll be this white page that says, are you sure you want to proceed to this website? It may be potentially unsafe. So the information that if you're a consumer and you go to that and you're going to see a doctor, think about that from the psychological standpoint. You're probably not going to want to go that way. Mm-hmm. The other thing too is that from a security standpoint, an SSL or secure, blanking what it stands for, something link, something lock. An SSL where you go HTTPS makes your website more secure from end-to-end encryption. So if people are submitting information to you, you absolutely need to have that, because otherwise hackers can get your information and they can steal patient information and information like that. So that's a absolutely crucial thing. You must have an HTTPS for your website.
Great. Yeah, I did not know that. Dr. Martinez wants to know, what are your thoughts on Yelp versus Google? Is paying for Yelp ads worthwhile?
No, I hate Yelp. Stay away from them as much as possible. No, I just had this talk with one of my clients the other day where they were saying, Yelp is holding them hostage because they're not going to show their 5-star reviews unless they pay them X number of dollars a month. I would say just avoid Yelp at all costs. I don't think Yelp is really prominent anymore in our society. If you're going to pay for anything, I would do Google. I would pay for Bing. I'd pay for Facebook. But I would stay away from Yelp because people aren't using that nearly as frequently.
Okay, thanks for that advice. A couple more questions. What are your thoughts on Squarespace compared to WordPress? Is it possible to get similar SEO results?
That is an excellent question. I think Squarespace is probably the best do-it-yourself builder that I've seen. With that being said, I would absolutely stay away from Wix. I would stay away from, what's the other one? Weebly is really bad as well. The GoDaddy page builders, I would avoid those at all costs. I have done countless SEO analysis for people that have had Wix and Weebly websites, and their rankings are in the 40s or 50s. So I'm not talking about like you're on page 2, you're on page 4 or 5 with these things. So generally speaking, a lot of these do-it-yourself builders are not very good for SEO, even though they may have SEO components that are built into the actual application. Squarespace, what I've seen, tends to be one of the better ones though. So I think if you're doing things intelligently, then you can be relatively successful with it. Cool,
because mine's on Squarespace, and I know that my website, people have been trying to convince me to go to WordPress, but I'm like, but I only know how to use Squarespace, and I don't want to invest the time to learn how to use WordPress. Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that I don't have to switch if I don't want to.
Yeah.
Okay,
WordPress
last question.
WordPress is a very big learning curve. It is not simple. There's a lot of components to it. The one thing I'll just kind of touch upon that too is that Workspace is what they call open source, meaning nobody owns it. So the downfall about using a company like Squarespace or Wix is, let's say hypothetically, their company goes under 6 months from now. What happens to your website? It's gone. It's absolutely nowhere in the world. So something like WordPress, it takes a lot longer to understand how to use it, but you own absolutely everything and it's not going anywhere. So just kind of keep that in mind too.
That is kind of scary. Okay, last question from Dr. Brill. Is it better to reach out 100 to 200 miles away for specialty service ads like IPL or LippyFlow, or for a geolocator fence?
Better than what? Like better than not doing it at all, or what?
I'm assuming maybe like instead of just doing it right where you are, maybe within like a 20-mile radius, maybe go out to 100 to 200 miles. Is that worth it to maybe pay for those types of ads?
It might be. You'd have to really do some trial and error, I think. It really depends on the type of place you live in. If you're in New York City trying to do these ads, then no, I'd say that's probably pointless because there's going to be countless other people, even in a 10 or 15-mile radius, that would. If you're in a very rural area, for example, Columbia, Missouri, again, we've got 130,000 in town here. But then our next biggest cities are St. Louis, which is 120 miles, and Kansas City, which is 120 miles. So, theoretically, if I ran a 100-mile campaign around my vicinity for that, you might get something.
Yeah.
I would probably, if it were me, I would probably start smaller and try 20 to 30 miles because people are going to be a lot more apt to want to drive 20 or 30 minutes than 2 hours. So just kind of keep that in mind from your patient's perspective, what you think they may be willing to do.
Cool. Well, thank you, Dr. Zimbalist, for your amazing education. I know a ton of people have been commenting on how awesome this presentation was and just how knowledgeable you are. And, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with the Woo You crew.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks again for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. All right, so we are going to go straight into our next exhibit hall. And